Hello, Ahuba. Good evening and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Hello, Rabbi, and everybody.
Okay, I think we're live. Yes, we are. Okay. One moment, get this all cleared. All right. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay. So whoever can show their beautiful faces, that would be wonderful. Oh, it makes the engagement and learning, teaching and learning all the more um, impactful, at least for me, and I'm sure for everybody else. So Shavua Tov, good Tovach, a good week to everybody. Hello, Andrew. I said hello to everybody, but you. I had mentioned that all we saw was your seat, your chair, and there's a phrase that we will bring up later, as the Benkel is a groise. In Yiddish, that means that the chair is a big chair, meaning the chair that represents leadership is a powerful and important chair. Well, we'll get there later. But it's better that there's someone who's occupying the chair than so we appreciate. So, well, speaking about a powerful and lofty chair, so this week's Parsha, of course, Yosef, in the ongoing saga, and which we're, I'm sure, all familiar with, he now gets that big benkel. He gets the powerful chair, second in command, Mishnah Lamelech. Only Pharaoh is more powerful and mightier than he. And this is all after the trials and tribulations that he went through. And he is able to give, what's interesting, a response to the dreams of Pharaoh, not just what the problem was. In other words, there's going to be feast and then famine, right? 7 years of feast and then 7 years of famine. But he gave the solution, which was what was unique about his response. And as a result, since he is a man of solutions and not just of indicating what the problem is, and it was in the dream itself that he found the solution, which Pharaoh's advisors were not able and capable of finding the solution. So he gets the job, he gets the benkel, he gets the chair, and he is the second in command, as I'm sure we're all familiar with the story. And of course, then the years of famine, when they come, it affects not only Egypt, but also the neighboring country, Canaan, where Yaakov and his sons are. And finally, it's time to go and get some food. And the only place you can get food at this point is in Egypt by Yosef, because Yosef had the foresight of storing things during the times of feast, which that itself tells us an important lesson in life. When things are good, sometimes we squander what we have, but you got to prepare for challenging times. And so he does, and they come. And of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with the story, that he is difficult to his brothers. And the reason why he's difficult is because he needs to bring them to a point where they will do tshuva. Well, they will repair what they had done previously that was wrong to him. And the way they will do it is by doing what's right towards Benjamin, his younger brother, that put in the same position. Are they going to stand up for him? And in the end, of course, they do. And then there is a beautiful scene where the drama doesn't come to a complete close, but there is the union, reunion, I guess we should call it, of Yosef and Binyamin. Well, that's where we pick up the story. Give me a moment because okay. And okay, a little difficulties. So guess what? I'm going to read it to you. So what does it say? Yosef fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. Now, on a simple level, there's no need for explanation here. Of course, 22 years apart, they are now coming together, brothers from the same mother, right? Of course, there's going to be a moment of great emotion that has been pent up for 22 years and now has been the moment that it can be expressed fully. And so it is that they cry. Now, on a simple level, you might say, okay, that's enough. But we can't take it just simply that they cried because of the reunion. Because first of all, then they should have cried before they even embraced. The verse doesn't say that. Secondly, the verse tells us that they cried on, it says that Yosef cried on the necks, plural, of Binyamin. What does it mean, plural? Necks, neck. And why is the Torah telling us that that's where they cried? What is the point to tell us that that is where they cried? Seemingly that is irrelevant to the fact that it's a reunion. It would be seemingly irrelevant. Is that question clear? So based on that, the Talmud tells us the following. Yosef cried over the two temples that were destined to be in Binyamin's tribal territory and that were destined to be destroyed. And the same verse continues, and Binyamin wept over his neck, right, in the singular. Binyamin cried over the tabernacle, the Mishkan of Shiloh, that was destined to be in the tribal territory of Yosef in the area of Ephraim, which is one of the two sons of Yosef, that was also destined to be destroyed. So let's get some history over here. And I'm sorry that it did not work. Hold on, quick moment. Let's get some history over here. So when was the Exodus from Egypt? In the year 2448, right? Which is 3,333 years ago precisely. The construction of the first Mishkan was a year later, of the tabernacle in the desert. The entry into Israel was 40 years later, which we're all familiar with, so 2488. The Mishkan in Shiloh, which was the first home of God in the land of Israel, this is in 2502, which is 14 years after entering the land of Israel. 7 years to conquer the land, 7 years to divvy up the land. So in that time, in 14 years, then it was the Mishkan Shiloh. Again, where was the Mishkan Shiloh? That was in the area of Ephraim, which is part of the tribe of Yosef, right? That Mishkan stood for 369 years, long time, right? 369 years, and was destroyed. It was destroyed. Then in the first holy temple, so it's interesting, we're talking about now about 400 years till there was the home of the Holy Temple, which was in Jerusalem. Till then, Jerusalem was not chosen. Interesting. Can anybody give me, with your show of hands, how many times Jerusalem is mentioned in Chumash? 1 time? 5 times? More than my 10 fingers. Who will tell me?
0.
0, right? Ahuva is correct. Who else said that? Who said 0? I didn't catch that. Oh,
I
whoever.
learned that from you from a
Me.
lesson.
Oh, okay. Who's me?
Denise.
Oh, Denise. Okay, thank you, Denise. 0 times. It's referred to as the place where I will dwell my name. In a future tense. That's what it's referred to. It was meant to be something that would be ultimately found by King David and ultimately built by Shlomo Melech, and was not even meant to be on the entry in Eretz Yisrael. Again, Shiloh, the Mishkan, was 369 years in the area of Ephraim until it was destroyed. So then the first temple is built in the year 2928. It was destroyed 410 years later in 3338. And then 70 years later, second temple was built, and it was destroyed in 2828, which is in the year 69 of the Common Era. Maybe that's a little easier.
What is the area of Ephraim?
Ephraim is what we would call northern Israel. It's above
Lebanon?
No. It's just above. It's above Jerusalem. It's above the tribe of Binyamin. Okay, where, as we'll get to in a moment. And you know what? I'm sorry. Give me a moment because I do. I thought I had it, that I could show it to you, and I guess I had some difficulty that it didn't work. But let's see if we can do this. No. Okay. Any questions on that? Is that clear? So, what do we have over here? So we have Benjamin. So now, Jerusalem is situated between 2 tribes, Benjamin, Binyamin, and Yehuda. And part of it, and it's divided. How's it divided? Sorry. We'll get to that in a moment. It's divided that Yehuda, the Temple Mount, is part of Yehuda, Judah. Benjamin has the Holy of Holies, and where the altar and the sacrifices were offered. So now, with this, we can understand the following. The concept of the neck that they fell upon is a metaphor for what? The home of God. For Binyamin falling on the neck of Yosef, it refers to the tabernacle in Shiloh, and he had a vision that in the future it's going to be built but destroyed. And Binyamin is crying, and Yosef is crying over Binyamin because he has a vision in the future that the two holy temples that are going to be there are going to be built, but they're going to be destroyed. And we have this concept of the neck being called the Tower of David. As the Midrash tells us, the temple is situated at the world's peak, just as the human neck is at the high point of a person's body. That's what the Midrash says. Now, the obvious question is, oh, look at that. Okay. So the obvious question is, okay, so the neck is the high point, but it's not the highest point. You know, if you think about the highest point of the individual, what is it? The head. The head is where the divine soul is occupied in the brain. If you want to, when you want to look inside a person, inside and know what's going inside of them, where do you look? In their eyes, because their eyes is a window to the soul. So seemingly, if the holy temple is, you know, the holiest place on earth, it should be on the highest point, and it shouldn't be what would we call the neck, meaning it is of the high point, but it isn't truly the highest point. It's elevated, but not the ultimate elevated point. Why would that be? Why would the holy temple not be built in the highest point? You know, I live living in Montreal, so the Catholic Church is very prominent, or it used to be very prominent in the lives of people, but it's still prominent in its architecture. And where is it? The highest points throughout the city. Because of course, the highest point, you're making a greater statement just on a simple level. But also it's the idea of, you know, you're going up. You're going up to Jerusalem. We call it Aliyah. That's what it means. But why wouldn't it be then to the highest point? Why was it built just a bit lower than the highest point within Jerusalem itself? So there's a metaphor over here of the concept of the neck that we need to understand what that means. As the Talmud actually tells us, the best part of the ox is the shoulders. Shoulder meat is the best part. It is the strongest and the best part. What does that mean exactly? How do we understand that? So what does the neck do? It connects the highest point in the person, the head, to the rest of the body, of course, right? To the torso, to the heart, the lungs, the digestive system, and so on. It is, in a sense, the funnel between the highest point and the rest of the body. What does that mean? It means like this. The mind, you know, you see this with people who are like the absent-minded professor. What is the problem with an absent-minded professor? Anybody? Where does he live? Or she? Usually he, but he lives in his head, right? And what's the problem with living in your head?
You're not connected to other people.
You're not connected to other people. What else? Anything else?
Not
Very good.
necessarily.
Excellent, Leanna. By the way, please put on your cameras, folks.
Oh, sorry.
Good to see you. Yeah, exactly, Leanna. Right? You're not connected with other people. What else?
Not connected to your body.
You're not connected. You're living in a theoretical, abstract existence. You're not living in a real world, in the practicality of everything of this world.
Also, I would say you might not be connected to your emotions, the head and the emotions.
Right. You're not connected to your emotions, right? And from emotions, you're not going to be connected to then your hands and your feet to, to live in a physical world. So the point is as follows. The association between the neck and the temple and the holy temple is that heaven and earth need an intermediary of something that's going to bring heaven to earth. Heaven is something that's transcendent and is above and beyond. and is not something that is naturally something that is of our, shall we say, our world. We don't live in Atzilus, right? We don't live in the abstract spiritual realm. And in order to bring the infinite abstract light of God into this world, we need the interface, we need the go-between, we need the neck that does that. That's what the Holy Temple is meant to be. It's meant to take the divine and bring it into this world and make it real, make it practical, not make it like the absent-minded professor who's living in his head and no one knows what's going on in that person's life as a result. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, and this is the ultimate purpose of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple is not about being holy. It's about bringing holiness down here into this world. It's about bringing the holiness of God that it is transcendent and make it accessible and real down here. That's the idea of the neck, right? The neck is to channel that which the brain has, right? So, and everything that the brain and the head has, that it should now be functional. How's it functional? Well, it's sending the signals, through the neck that the mind wants to move the hand, so now the hand is being moved, right? And that's the function, is to make whatever there is an idea that might be merely abstract, to make it concretize, make it real down here. That a wonderful teacher in school, when the kids were playing out in the pavement, newly freshly minted pavement in front of his house, and they were writing their names there, and they were playing and ruining the freshly placed cement by the city workers, and he got very angry at them, and one of the parents came by. What's going on over here? I thought you were their teacher, and that you are, a devoted teacher to these children. So he says to them, you know what? I must love them in the abstract, but not in the concrete, right? This is what the neck needs to do, is to bring the love of God, the light of God, the infinite of God, and to make it concrete into this world. And that's what the Holy Temple is all about. And with this, and we can, and therefore, that's why the Holy Temple is where? It's of the higher part of the mountain. Is it the highest point? No. It's somewhere a little down, just like the neck is of the higher point of the individual, but somewhere a little down, in order that it should reflect. And this is such a profound idea of how every simple little thing, as just where the Holy Temple is situated, is a reflection of what the Holy Temple is all about, to bring that godliness into this world. So, Jason, welcome. Jason, if we could see you, that would be amazing. Especially that way we could give you a mazel tov, because Jason just became engaged. I was hoping that we'd be able to see you with the kala. But
Mazel tov, Jason.
yes, a mazel tov. Oh, there he is, the chassan. Oh, chatan.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, Jason.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Can we see more of you?
Thank you.
This is one of the wonderful things that COVID brought, because Jason is engaged, but we won't go into that right now, but it's a result of COVID. So all things being equal, everything is for the good. Okay, tell me if you see the shared screen. You don't, right? You do?
I do, yeah.
Text number 6?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So this is from the Rebbe's teachings. The Holy Temple's function is to fill the entire world with godly light, including the most mundane and unholy places. For this reason, the temple was at a high point of the world, but still not too high and detached from it. For to illuminate the world, the temple had to be lowered to be to the place it was meant to impact, just as the neck, the bridge between the head and the body, needs to be near the torso to connect it with the elevated brain, making them one. The same holds true with the mini temple found inside all of us. When our godly soul is not aloof and removed from our little world, rather it is involved and integrated with the body, then we can rectify and sublimate ourselves and our surroundings, making the temple a dwelling place for God's presence. So this is the practical message, is that we should not remain aloof. We need to recognize, of course, we live in a physical world that we need to engage. And the Holy Temple itself expresses that very simply in the very fact that where it was actually placed. Now, with this, we can also understand that the windows to the temple, where they were made wider on the outside and narrow on the inside. Most windows are just, straight. But here they were thick walls. They were narrow and they went out like this. I'm inside the temple, imagine, and this is the outside. So it was on an angle. And the reason why is for this very reason, is because the light of the Holy Temple was meant not to be illuminating the world within itself, within the temple, within the Beis HaMikdash, but it was meant to illuminate the outside world. The light of God from above should then be expressed with a practical, real way down here in this world. Okay, so now we can understand why did they weep on each other's neck. In other words, it wasn't just a moment of reunion, but it was a moment of personal reunion, but it was a moment of reunion of everything that they represent in life. Yosef represents his people in the future. Binyamin represents his people in the future, their tribe, their path, and each one had challenges that would come in the future. The Jews are going to go down to Egypt. They're going to be ultimately enslaved. Then we'll get we will get freedom. We will get the Torah. We will come into the land of Israel, but there will be a time that there was building of the Holy Temple, times that we had it, but times that it was destroyed. And now there was a sense of what the future would bring. And they sensed, or they had the vision, the prophetic vision of the future. And therefore they were crying as a result, because their union was meant to actually not just express what the future would have, but also affect the future in what was going to occur. Now, if that's the case, then there's a simple question that needs to be asked. And that is, who did Binyamin cry for? For the destruction of that which would be in Yosef's territory, Shiloh, the Mishkan Shiloh. That's what he was crying over. What did Yosef cry over? The necks of Binyamin. In Binyamin, there's going to be two necks, the first and second Holy Temple. That's why the plural, that they're going to be destroyed. So the obvious question is, why didn't each cry over the destruction that they had a prophetic vision of? Why didn't they cry over their own? Why are they crying over somebody else's? And even if you're going to cry for someone else's, first cry for yours. If you're having this vision of the future, then, and you see there's going to be destruction amongst the Jewish people, so that pains you and you're crying over it. Cry over yours, and then you cry over someone else's, or cry for both at the same time, maybe. But here it's to the exclusion. Each one is crying over the others, but not over their own. You know, not that anybody's traveling too much these days, but you know, what does the flight attendant say? Put on your mask first, and then your child's mask, right? First, you got to take care of yourself, and then you're going to take care of someone else. So if there's pain and suffering, how is it that you're not taking care of your tribal needs, what you have a responsibility for? Why aren't you doing that? So that's a question that Reb asks. So the answer is as follows. You know, we cry for different things. Jason, I don't know when you, when you got engaged to Lori, if you cried. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking you. I'm just, and what kind of cry would that be? Tears of joy. Like, wow, this is my bashert. I'm overjoyed. When you're overjoyed by something, marrying off a child, or getting engaged, it's possible you're going to have tears. That would be tears of joy, right? Of course. But there's other tears that we can have, and that's sometimes we go through turmoil. We go through a lot of suffering. We go through a lot of difficulty, and we are in pain. We're in despair, and we cry. Now, it depends what that cry is about, and if that's a healthy cry, or maybe not, it's a healthy cry. So give me an example of despair that a person has, that crying could be a healthy and positive and good thing. Anybody have something to share with me? I'm sure you have something to share, but not all at once. Jason? No? Liana? Sometimes you can be pained by something. Oh, go ahead. Liana, you want to say something?
You want to know when crying is a good thing, when it's a
Besides
positive?
tears of joy.
You feel the disconnect. Like, let's say you feel that it's whatever the situation is, it's incorrect. So it's for the good because you realize you're not in a good place, or you feel you're disconnected from God, or.
Okay, very good. Sometimes you go ahead. Oh, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, the same thing. Like when you're crying out to Hashem, like in prayer. Let's say you want something so badly, and you're crying out. You're just like pouring out your heart. You know, asking Hashem for His blessing.
Right. Very good. Excellent, both of you. In other words, the distance can bring you to a painful moment when you feel distance, and that crying can be a catalyst to bring you closer, right? As Liana mentioned, and Jason, right? When you are feeling the pain, if it's personal pain or for someone else, right? And you cry out to Hashem in a painful manner, right? In order to attach yourself to Hashem. Very good. Any other thoughts on that? Anybody? Give me an instance, if you will, when crying actually is counterproductive.
When we're crying,
Anybody?
not
When it brings
learn
Sorry,
from
Malka, and then.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
when?
When we're crying and not trying to learn from the situation, if there's something we need to gain from it. And that's why I was thinking
Okay.
before why they may have cried for each other, because they were empathizing with each other. But maybe for their own situation, it was a time of it was a time of learning, and why they did
Excellent.
cry over theirs first.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. David?
Yeah. So when we're crying because we're just, well, just actually, it brings us into a negative place, into depression. If it brings us into, really, we're just feel sorry for ourselves, and it's not really elevating us. So,
Excellent. Excellent. So sometimes, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, that when we feel a crushing experience or something that's painful, and we have a good cry, right? We cry it out, as the expression goes. What does it mean you cry it out? It means it was painful, you let it out, and now the pain is gone. But the problem with that is it leads you to do nothing about the situation. Now, sometimes maybe there's nothing to do for a situation, but if it is something that is in your hands, your responsibility, your capacity that you could do something, crying actually mitigates you from doing something because you cried it out. Now you feel okay. I'm okay now. You're okay because you don't feel the pain anymore. But the situation hasn't been resolved. Whatever needs to be fixed wasn't dealt with. That's the problem with crying. It releases you from feeling obligated to fix that which needs mending, to heal that which needs healing. And therefore, crying is not a healthy or good thing. You know, today I must say I had a trying day dealing with what's called a mace mitzvah. A person who passed away, who doesn't really have anybody to take care of the body. And somehow it came to me. How it came to me, I don't know the person. The parents are not alive. There's whatever. God orchestrates things the way he orchestrates things. And it came to my hands. And then finally I dealt with someone who was a partial relative, and I was on the phone with another person who was also somewhat, related, but like hadn't seen this person for 30 years and no connection. And it came out that there could be an issue over here of this person, God forbid, not having a Jewish burial, and even worse. And this one person from out of town started crying. And this other individual, actually a friend of mine, that I didn't know the connections, it's just divine providence how things work out. Says, listen, crying isn't going to help anything. We've got to calm down, and we've got to do what we got to do. So what was going through her is like, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They went through the camps, and, they saw what they saw, and, and now this is what's going to happen here. Like, it was unthinkable. And she got so emotional, and just started crying and crying. And after the cry, what would have happened was she would have released the tension. And now, quite possibly, if it wasn't for me and my friend being there, nothing would have happened. It would have stayed where it would have stayed, and there wouldn't have been help to mend the situation. That's what a good cry can do. As opposed to, okay, there's a problem here. There's something that needs to be dealt with. Let's deal with it. Let's do what we got to do. And that's all. Emotional paralysis, crying leads us to inaction, and therefore we're not allowed to cry when we shouldn't cry. As the Rebbe says in Hayoim Yoim, famous teachings of the Rebbe from Thought of the Day. 1 second on the screen over here. My revered father, the Rebbe Rashab, writes in one of his letters, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, one action is better than 1,000 sighs. Our God is alive, and the Torah and its mitzvahs are eternal. Abandon sighing, apply yourself diligently to practical action, and God will be gracious to you. So this is exactly what happened between Yosef and Binyamin. Yosef could not cry over his destruction. Binyamin could not cry over his own destruction, even though it's not a personal thing in the sense that it's in his lifetime, but it's in his people. It's in his territory. It's in his, so to speak, jurisdiction, if you will. That he has to own it. He's got to fix whatever he can. If there's something that I can do to fix at this moment, I'm going to fix it. But when it comes to somebody else, I can, try to help them to see the light. I can try to bring them to deal with and own that which they need to own. But in the end, I can't fix anybody's life. I can guide, I can mentor, I can be an inspiration, but everybody can only fix their own life. Right? That's all we can do. So for each one, they didn't cry for themselves, but at a certain point for another, for you, I can cry. After I've done all that I can to inspire and to lead in whatever way I can then cry for you, but not for myself. That I can never do. And this is what the Rebbe explains here. In text number 11, when you have already done whatever you can to help your friend, yet you see that his temple is still in ruins, it should profoundly affect you to the point of crying. However, when it comes to your own temple, you cannot be satisfied with sighing and crying about its destruction. Instead, you must do everything in your power to rebuild your spiritual edifice through personal growth and freeing your soul to express itself. Indeed, tears that stem from the deep desire to return to God can themselves be redeeming and instrumental in the reconstruction of your psyche. But at times, the tears are precisely what hold us back and weaken us. We become distracted into seeing our tears as actual progress, when in reality, no progress was made. And what's amazing, folks, we have an amazing dichotomy about Yosef, who we call Yosef HaTzadik, the righteous one. He was a living paradox. He cried a lot, and he was stoic a lot. When did he cry? He cried when his brothers confronted him and they had regret for selling him, right? They didn't understand that he knew what was going on. Yosef cried when he invited the brothers for a meal and he meets Binyamin for the first time. He almost reveals himself by mistake. Yosef reveals his identity to his brothers and he's overcome and cries, so much so that all the houses in Egypt, or in the house of Pharaoh, they overheard this. As we learned here, of course, when he embraces his brother Binyamin. When Yaakov arrives to Egypt, Yosef goes to greet him, also crying. When Yaakov passes, he's crying. When he sees that his brothers are fearful, that he might not deal with them appropriately when Yaakov passes, he's also crying. When is he stoic? He's in prison. Is he crying in prison? No. Is he crying when he's a slave? No. Is he crying because he's been falsely objectified by the wife of Potiphar? No. Stoic. He does what he needs to do, fixes whatever he needs to fix, does whatever he can do. So we see the paradox over here. When it comes to something for myself, fix whatever I can. There's nothing to cry about. There's only fixing. Someone else, another individual. No. That person, let me be there for them. Try to help, inspire whatever I can. But in the end, I can't fix anybody else. I can only fix myself. So if I need to cry, I'm going to cry. So what do we learn here today? I know now that. Who can fill that in for me? Please open up your speakers and please share with me. I know now that.
Crying can either be for good or for bad, for either bring us down a negative path or done in the right way for someone else, can uplift us rather than draw us down.
Excellent. Thank
You
you.
know what I was gonna say, David.
Well, listen, husband and wife, you know that you're allowed to steal from each other. You're allowed to. And no tears for that, Denise and Linda. Well, what are you crying over? Oh, tears of joy. Okay, I got it. All right, who else? I know now that. What else do you know, Andrew?
Help.
Huh?
You have to help yourself. I mean, crying is not going to change what you need to do to reach a higher level.
I know now that a thousand sighs and a thousand cries for myself, feeling sorry for myself or feeling bad, even feeling bad, not even sorry, not necessarily even that you're a victim, right? But feeling the pain of what, of something that, no. One action is worth a lot more.
What?
Excellent.
Huh?
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Katie, Leanna, Jason, Celia, Ahuva, Saramalka. Who else? Carolina, Larry, Fremad, Karen. I know now that. Anybody? What else do you know?
I said we can't get stuck in neutral.
Go ahead, Larry. Say that again.
I say we can't get stuck in neutral.
You can't get stuck in neutral. Excellent. Thank you. Right.
When something
Remember the. Go ahead.
when something occurs, we need to fix it or deal with it and act on it, as opposed to, I guess, getting all emotional and crying over it. We need to act.
Right.
I mean, that goes back in what we learn about mitzvot, that doing the action is so important.
Right.
That
Absolutely. Thank you. Very good, Sarah Malka. Excellent, excellent. So let me give you like an example, maybe, in human relations, it sometimes, and it's obviously with closer people that these things usually happen. It's not with people that we don't know so well. That sometimes, someone shares with us, a loved one, a spouse quite often, a close friend, and sometimes it's something that is that's hurting them, that we did something. So often there's, we feel the pain and we don't want to feel the pain. Actually, I spoke about this idea on Shabbos. We don't want to feel the pain. right? So we feel bad, and we do even tshuva, but the tshuva is in order that I don't feel the pain, right? Because I feel bad about myself. Sometimes we need to do tshuva from tshuva, because what was the problem there? You feel bad, you did something, you hurt your friend's feeling, you said something that's, and you feel bad about it. But that itself is the problem, because you feel bad about it. In other words, you feel, maybe that person's going to be more distant from you now, not going to look at you the same way. So what are you doing? You're making it about you. That's not empathy. Empathy, and that's why each one cried over the other one, is even though there's destruction that they saw, they had a vision of the destruction, not only for the other, but for themselves. But they had complete empathy for the other. Meaning, when we hurt somebody, I feel bad that I did that. And we should, but we should focus in on the hurt that we gave to the other, rather than the feeling bad that I have of what I did. Because then it's not empathetic towards the other and feeling their pain. I'm just feeling my lowness, shall we say. I'm feeling my lack, which there's a level to that. Don't get me wrong, because that's an ownership for what you did, right? But it's not a complete ownership, because you're not empathetic to the other and the pain that you caused them. And that's not easy, by the way. That's not easy. Why? Because we live in our own bubble, and we are self-directed very naturally, and therefore we will feel feel bad about what I did, but not feeling the pain that I inflicted. That's a very different story. So I know now that the empathy that they felt for each other is an empathy that, was able to feel their pain, not, something I inflicted or something that, and of course it does, I'm stretching this a little because that's not the case in their case, right? But empathy, I'm just drawing it further, is that you feel, what you did to the other and the pain that that person is experiencing, rather than you feeling small, distant, bad, feeling bad about yourself. And yeah, and you're going to correct it, but you're not going to correct it in the same way as if you feel the pain that was inflicted. In other words, to feel their pain rather than my lack. Is that clear? Does that make sense? It's a profound idea.
It's very good.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Further, I know that, by the way, everybody's getting stuck here in the last part of the class. I know now that my mission statement is that I am a temple. I'm a temple of God. I have a holy soul that is situated in my head, my brain, the divine soul. But the divine soul, needs to be funneled into the rest of my being. It needs to affect, not just to be a spiritualist and to meditate on, top of the Tibetan mountains, but it needs to actually funnel the holiness and bring it down into my humanness, which is my hands, my feet, my animal soul ultimately. And I need to bring it ultimately and express godliness here on earth, heaven on earth. Rather than trying to reach heaven, I need to bring it down. So I know now that that is my mission statement, just as the Holy Temple was of the highest point in the land of Israel, but not the highest point, because it's a reflection of the neck. The neck is the funnel, the interface to bring holiness into this world, and that is the function of the Holy Temple. That is a function of me as a as a microcosm of the Holy Temple, and I need to be able to take everything that I know in the abstract, not like once Alexander the Great found his teacher Aristotle in a compromising position when he came unannounced to his home. And later on, he asked him, Aristotle, my teacher, my mentor, how is it that you acted in such a way? Well, at the academy, I'm Aristotle, the philosopher, the teacher, and the mentor. At home, I'm not Aristotle. In other words, Aristotle that's up here doesn't become Aristotle that is reflected in the rest of my being. But that's not the Jewish way. Torah is the word from Horah, guidance in our lives, and it needs to guide us that the holiness that we have in the head, in the brain, in our holy soul, in our very core of our being, needs to be funneled and reflected and expressed in everything in our lives. I know that now. That's my mission. We get once we learn another idea, sometimes we forgot about the first idea. So a reminder. Anybody else want to share? I know now that. Okay.
I know now that I'm gonna try that I need to stop thinking about myself and think about the others' feelings. That's what I need to do. Focus on.
I hear some laughter in the background. I hope that is that is tears of laughter. Sarah Malka, you were going to say something. Thank you.
I was to say it's not really relevant to the last, well, totally relevant to the last part of what you said, but back when you were talking about what you talked about at shul, about when we ask for forgiveness, can it be related to if we really don't understand what we might have said and how it would have hurt somebody, but to truly want to ask their forgiveness because we realize how we hurt them? That the reason we're asking the forgiveness is because we realize how much we hurt them with what we said, even though we may not totally understand it with our intellect.
So what are you suggesting? I'm not clear.
Kind of what it means, or partly what it means.
Can you rephrase that so I can make sure I have a clarity in what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying what you were saying is thinking of the other person when we're asking forgiveness and what they're feeling. So if we're not completely understanding in our head why what we said might have hurt them, but understanding what they're feeling.
Right.
And that's, that we need to apologize because they're feeling upset about what.
Right. So I guess,
because they're feeling pain, even if we don't totally understand it, but we're understanding from their point of view.
Yeah, so I guess we're not always going to understand, and not always do we have to own someone else's pain. We don't have to own the pain, ultimately, right? Because that person can also have a choice whether to be pained or not. Not necessarily do they have to be pained, right? If you did something, does that mean someone has to be pained by what you did if it was something that was, difficult for them? A harsh word, does that mean someone has to be pained? No. One person might take it in a painful way, and another person will take it in a, in a learning way, to learn from it and to grow from that. The fact that someone else might be pained is you know, not necessarily always your responsibility. But that doesn't mean you can't empathize with the pain. I don't know if I'm making clear the distinction.
It is. I'm understanding.
Right. So you can empathize with it and not be responsible for it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
And you're right. Sometimes it's harder to empathize because it seems, since when you think about it, if you're responsible, so then it's easier to empathize. But how about when you're not truly responsible? Because that person is responsible for their response, right? And the response doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But that being said, you may not feel responsible for it, but you can be empathetic for it and see that they're having a challenge and a difficulty. And it could be something you said that you didn't even mean that it should be hurtful and or whatever, but they took it that way. But more on this when we go to Tanya therapy. Eventually we're going to get there. Okay, I know now. Thank you, Sarah Malcolm, for that.
Sure.
I
Thank
know now that it's Hey Teves. And I want to share with you something about Hey Teves. A Farbregen for Hey Teves. What is Hey Teves? Hey Teves, first of all, is the 5th day of the month of Teves, which is today. And it is a holiday that, could you imagine, in our generation? We just come from Hanukkah, a story that happened in the 2nd century before the Common Era. Now we celebrate with a gusto, but we don't celebrate it in the same way as, you celebrate something that is very personal in the sense that it's something that's living for you. Something that's living for you, a child, you're marrying off a child, right? Yep, exactly, Andrew. You're marrying off a child. So, that's a real celebration for you. You're getting married, right? Real celebration. It's your life in your lifetime, right? Something that happened not in your lifetime is harder to connect, but that's the amazing thing about the Jewish people. Could you imagine things that happened to Jews so many years ago and we still connect with it and it was still important to us and so on. But could you imagine like you were, in the times of, the 40 years in the desert, or you were with Joshua going into the land of Israel, conquering the land, and you got your settlement, your place of settlement, Imagine when you're there with King David and you bought off the property from Arvana to the threshing floor where Temple Mount is going to be. You were there, you're part of that. First of all, the historical sense of it, of course, is something, but more important, it's the being a part of Jewish history. Not just in Canada we have something called participation. At least when I was a kid, I don't think they have it anymore. Participate. Don't be just a sideliner and watching the show, watching the game on the side. Be a participant. And get out there and do exercise, do sporting activities so you can get some exercise in. So imagine, and we have that in our generation. As in 1987, when there was the court case of the books that were stolen from the Rebbe's library from his own nephew, selling them for great profit because he needed money, and went to a non-Jewish court with a non-Jewish judge, Judge Sifton, and he gave the ruling. After I think it was about 30 odd days in court, and the ruling came down, the Dan Natsach, that the books belong to the Chabad Lubavitch library, to Agudas Chasidei Chabad, and it was a great moment. personally. I was in Montreal. I was in Chabad house and got the phone call, and sitting next to another shliach, Rabbi Kessler, took out some mashka. We said a l'chaim, and we started to dance together. And then called my wife. She said, "Go, go to New York." And I went down, got a ticket, went straight to the airport. I got a few things at home, whatever. Went straight to the airport and flew into New York. And the airport, I meet another, 100 Chassidim from Montreal, all going into New York. What was the big celebration? So one thing that we saw clearly, the Rebbe had a lot of pain through this whole ordeal. He went to the Ohel, the resting place of his father-in-law, throughout the court case, just about every day. And he spoke about it with great pain. And you might think, well, it's a bunch of books. First of all, they're holy books. Some of them are originals. As the Rebbe said, one of them is the Baal Shem Tov Siddur, that the Baal Shem Tov Siddur that the Rebbe himself said he never touched because he was just, the holiness of it was too great, that he felt, original manuscripts, 1,000 years old, 200 years old, from the Rebbeim, from all of the Chabad Rebbes. And these are, aside from the teachings, but it went even deeper than these were teachings that were integral, again, many original manuscripts and books that, of course, in the market, in the Jewish market, would have great value. But beyond, and I don't mean material value of money, of course it had that, but the wealth of spirituality there, of teachings. But it was actually even more, and the Rebbe himself expressed it. You know what it really was? It was trying to unseat the Rebbe. And Andrew, before you had your benkel, your chair there, and I made mention of it earlier. And we didn't see you on your chair. We always saw was a chair. And the Rebbe made mention of this, that it's a milchama of the benkel. It is a battle for the chair of the Chabad throne, shall we say, where they claimed that with the previous Rebbe, that's it, it's all finished. Chabad had finished its chapter and its movement had finished. And that he was the rightful heir of the only grandson of the previous Rebbe, and therefore a rightful heir of at least part of the library. And again, it was about, is there a Rebbe? Is the Chabad movement still under the leadership of the Rebbe? And this was what the underlying theme, shall we say, in the court case. So I heard from my teacher explained as follows. We had a story called Purim. What was Purim? It was a decree in heaven against the body of the Jewish people, that Haman wanted to destroy the physical reality of the Jewish people. Then came the story of Hanukkah. Right, came a few hundred years later. And what was the story of Hanukkah? It was that the Syrian Greeks wanted to destroy not the body of the Jew, the soul of the Jew, because they want to get rid of Judaism. No more Jewish life. That's what Hanukkah was, a decree against the soul of the Jew. Then came Yutis Kislev, 200 years ago, the Alter Rebbe, and that was a decree in heaven too. What was the decree? The decree was on the light of Chassidus, which means the teachings of Chassidus. On the teachings themselves was a decree. Is the world ready for these teachings, or is the world not ready for these teachings? That was what the decree was. Now came in our generation a decree that was not on the teachings, but on the teacher, on the Rebbe. Is he still Rebbe? Is a Rebbe truly a Rebbe? And or is this something that was of the past and no longer really exists anymore? No longer exists. there's a lot to go into this point, but just briefly, is a Rebbe just a regular person that has, like me and you, we have our public life, we have our private life, we have our life as a leader in the community, and then we have our private life? Or is a Rebbe just a different kind of individual? That everything about him is only there for the people. So interesting, the Rebbe, when he called in the lawyers who were his lawyers in the case, so he said, pay particular attention to one letter that was written by the previous Rebbe to the head librarian of the Jewish Theological Seminary, who had a huge library and was one of the biggest libraries. This is in the 40s during the war. That he wrote a letter to the head librarian there. And what was it? It was in order to save the books from the previous Rebbe from war-torn Europe that was left behind. And in that letter, he writes that the books belong to Agudas Chasidei Chabad, to the Chabad movement, and therefore do whatever you can in order to retrieve those books because they have great value to the movement and to the Jewish people. Again, original manuscripts. We're talking about manuscripts that are 1,000 years old. We're talking manuscripts that were, a couple hundred years from all the Chabad Rebbes and so on. Like an original Rashi manuscript, from many years ago with Rambam and so on. And the Rebbe said pay particular attention because look what this letter is saying is that the library belongs to the movement and it's not a personal library. So those who fought against the Rebbe, they said, well, no, the Rebbe wasn't telling the truth. Because if it was a personal library, then in a time of war, one government would not intercede for someone's personal belongings to try to get them, to get them for that individual. And therefore, that's why he said that. But really, they belong to him personally. And since I'm the grandson, the only one, I'm an heir. And Judge Sifton recognized that after he understood what a Rebbe is, a Rebbe cannot lie, even to save his books, even to save his library. If he wrote that this belongs to the movement, then it must belong to the movement. And a non-Jew, this is a non-Jew, understood what a Rebbe is. They wanted to make a Rebbe just, a regular person like me and you, like Andrew, your seat, I have a seat. We sit in a chair. The Rebbe sits in a chair. We all sit in a chair and we are who we are. And Rebbe, same thing. And the judge understood that a Rebbe is a holy individual as such that whatever he says is what he truly means. And if he said that this is what it belongs to, then there's no doubt that this is who it belongs to. And that was one of the leading arguments that was used in order to come to the conclusion. Amongst also what the Rebbe's wife, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, said when she was asked, so she said, who do the books belong to? And so she said, the books and the Rebbe belong to the Chassidim. To the Chassidim. And that actually, I just heard a story that the niece of Judge Sifton, who lives in Saskatchewan, Canada here, said that statement really gave him a different perspective on things. So, Hey Teves is that the teacher, the Ma'or, the source of light, right? There's the teachings. The Alter Rebbe, it was a decree against the teachings. Here's a decree against the teacher, against the Rebbe. Is a Rebbe just, a regular teacher, like, and can, have his whatever, has, or is a Rebbe a Rebbe? Or is a Rebbe truly, a Rebbe is truly the neck, right? Just like the Holy Temple is the neck. You know, what's so amazing about the Holy Temple? It's the presence of God that is brought down from on high and is reflected down here in this world, right? What is a Rebbe? It's the presence of God, right, that is truly reflected down here on earth. That's what a Rebbe is. Now, are we that? Absolutely. We've got a holy soul. We've got a godly soul. The difference is our godly soul is kind of imprisoned. It's in jail. It's not truly revealed. We reveal it sometimes, sometimes not. We're not a living holy temple. In potential, we are. Not in actual reality in every breathing, living moment. But that's what a Rebbe is. He is that the neck, the holy temple in flesh and blood. And that's an important thing to appreciate. We have the Holy Torah, right? We have the Holy Temple. But all of that is not truly alive. How come? Well, because in the end, it's ink on parchment and it's stones of a building. Is it holy? Absolutely. Whoever has gone to Israel and been in the Western Wall, is it holy? Absolutely. I'm not denying that. It's not the same kind of holiness as a Rebbe. Because he's a person that is in the embodiment of Torah. A living Torah scroll. Not ink on parchment. I don't, not to belittle ink on parchment, of course, but in perspective, it's not the same. Why is it not the same? Because ink on parchment, or you go to the Western Wall, we can all shed a tear there. We can all feel whatever we feel. Yeah, but, and we go away, not necessarily any different. Not necessarily any different. Yeah, it was a moving experience. Whoa, I went to the Western Wall. I went to the tunnels. I was stood right directly where the Western Wall is under the ground over there, against the, wonderful. Did you change? Were you different because of that experience? Sometimes, yes. I don't want to belittle me or you or anybody here or any of us, don't get me wrong. But usually that's not the case. It doesn't change us. The Western Wall, the stone doesn't change you. Torah doesn't change you unless you change yourself. But when a person who's an embodiment of it, that you are inspired by, that's going to inspire greater change from within. That's going to really what's going to make me who I need to be. And that's why, the importance of a Rebbe is because it ultimately is bringing heaven on earth in the sense of just as the Holy Temple does it. So there's the individual who is the embodiment of that and brings it to us in a way that is specific for me in our generation. Because, think about it. The Western Wall hasn't changed. Whether it's 50 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, it's the same Western Wall. So how is it that if I go there, or any of you that are with me right now, or the thousands of people that go there, how's it speaking to me today different than it did to whatever the needs were and what the challenges were 200 years ago, whoever stood in front of the Western Wall? Well, it doesn't. It speaks to me whatever I want it to say to me. which itself can be a challenge and a difficulty and a problem. But when you have someone who is a teacher, a mentor, a Rebbe, who is the embodiment of that light of God and is to project it to us and to the world, and that's what he's there for, is to, as the Rebbetzin said, the books and the Rebbe belong to the Chassidim, belong to all of us, because he's just there for us, totally. Never given over to us. So to us means to where I am at, because he teaches me, to what the call of the hour is for our generation and for what my specific needs are in my particular life, in my particular, situation. And therefore, in a sense, hey, Teves then becomes like, whoa, really powerful and all important Yontif. The amazing thing is, in our generation, not distant. Now, even though Gimel Tammuz has happened and the Rebbe is not physically with us, but the Rebbe is today more with us than ever before in spirit. And we rise to the occasion of being more connected, more than ever before. And that, and that is happening. 7-day celebration. That's what happened originally. So a good yontif to everybody. That's a
Yom Tov.
Any questions on this, or any comments, any thoughts? There's much more to share.
Rabbi, I'm not sure if I missed the point, but the nephew, did he only want the books, or did he want to have the leadership of the movement?
Oh, no. He was in difficult times and he wanted the money. And the books were, a great
Right.
to make a quick buck. No. He wasn't a committed Jew at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Rebbetzin testified that I think she was asked what he owned, like if he was rich or something. It supposedly only testified that what he owned was a pair of tefillin and a talis. That's the only thing. Everything else belonged to the.
Yeah. Ahuba, you wanted to say something? Right?
No, I was upping the volume because I couldn't hear what Andrew was saying. Sorry.
So it's let me see if I got the link over here. I'm going to try to show you. You can see a video of me dancing on the benches of.
Awesome.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to give me a moment. I just thought of it. I should have thought of it earlier. My apologies. But as they say in French, better late than never. 1 second. Let's see if we can do this. Maybe we'll get a little treat. You know what's beautiful is my kids and my grandchildren since it's video in our times, right? So we like they lived. I mean, my kids were very young then, so just a few of them. Some of them were born then, but they have a video which expresses, you know, the joy and the unbelievable happiness, and that they were, you know, that they can now watch it and be a part of it. It's amazing. So give me a second. Let me see if I can find it here. My son posted. I thought my. Welcome, Repesach, a Gejantiv.
Learning more since this together. Okay.
So I made
My grandchildren. Well, some other pleasurable things. Shoot. I'm a little not getting it. Why I don't see it here.
You posted it on Facebook, I think.
Oh, yes. My son did, you're right. But I thought he posted it on the family group. Hold on. Give me a moment. One second. There you go. Oh, okay. I got it. Okay, here it is. Okay. Okay. Thought I had it. Have it on my phone. I gotta find it over here. Oh, okay. Let us share. I'm the backside over here. I want the hand going. A little sweet something. So,
That was great.
Amazing.
So my
That was
kids and
great.
grandchildren, you know, as we mentioned, it's not Hanukkah that happened 2,000 odd years ago. Chas v'shalom to take away from Hanukkah, but to have something in your lifetime that is a celebration, a new holiday, and that you know, you were a part of, and now you could see on video your, you know, your Zaidi, your father, and so we said a lot of l'chaim. We danced the whole night till my 7 o'clock flight in the morning. Didn't go to sleep the whole night. The place was packed and mobbed with chassidim that came from all over the place to celebrate, because as much as the pain was for the Rebbe that we experienced, that's how much the joy had to be on the other side of things. And it's as we expressed earlier, that that the ultimate joy is that Dida Natsach, that the Rebbe is our Rebbe, and that there's the idea of the Rebbe is something that even the non-Jewish judge appreciated and understood, which is also brings up the idea that we spoke in the Sikha of the idea of the neck, of bringing down to earth, right? That the concept of a Jewish leader, of a Rebbe, a holy individual, that's a lofty thing. You know, we have no idea what a Rebbe is. There was a good Jew that came to the original Rebbe, was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He said, Rebbe, you know, I just learned that the Talmud says it's 36 hidden tzaddikim, righteous people. Well, obviously you're not one of them because everybody knows you're righteous. So the original Rebbe said, Oi, Eichen Ve'ayf Mir. Woe upon me if that my righteousness is what you see of me. What we see of the righteous people, remember, is only from our bubble of who we are. So what do we see of them? Such a limited perspective. Eons beyond. Eons, and we have no inkling. That's how great. Remember, we learned in Tanya that a righteous person has complete mastery over their every emotion. Subliminal emotions, not just emotions that are expressed, but the ones that are deep rooted in the complete righteous person, completely bound and united with God on the emotional and intellectual level. We can't imagine what that is. We have trouble with our behavior to be aligned with God, let alone the inner workings of our heart and mind. Not thoughts, I'm talking about the mind itself. And that's an external aspect of a Rebbe, by the way. That's a righteous person. A Rebbe is eons beyond the righteous. Just like, because righteous are many, 36 righteous, but a Rebbe, head of the Jewish people, there's one. That's already, beyond. So that person really is like the head. It's way beyond. But as we learned over here, his whole function is like the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, is to bring that holiness down to here. The function of the Rebbe is to bring it to us. So you can imagine a court case that it's not being presided by rabbis, right? With at least what Torah perspective is of a righteous person and a Rebbe, they have some kind of, a non-Jew. And the non-Jew appreciates and understands. In other words, it was brought down to earth, this idea of a Rebbe, right? That a Rebbe is an integral part of Judaism, an integral part that is something that needs to be continued. Just like we said, Yutis Kislev was a decree against the teachings. It needed to continue after the Alter Rebbe left prison. So likewise, the idea of Teves is the idea of Rebbe, of the source of light, right? There's the light, the teachings, and the source of light, the Rebbe, the teacher, the mentor, the Rebbe. That is something that is integral and must be continued. And that's so important now because we have a Gimel Tammuz where the physical reality of the Rebbe is not with us. So we need to have that concept, very, what's the word I'm thinking of, emphasized. It's not de-emphasized. It needs to be emphasized because it's now as important and even more important than ever before. And with that, you know what? I should have a l'chaim here and say l'chaim. Pesach, zog l'chaim. I have to say l'chaim. No, I'm getting a l'chaim. Wait, Pesach, share something with us.
Good Yontif. An amazing thing came out of the court case from Dida Notzach. In secular law, there's two different kinds of.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? Do you have a l'chaim? Could you get a l'chaim? Andrew, you have a l'chaim? You're not working. You could say l'chaim, right? Jason, you have a l'chaim? Take a l'chaim.
Jason.
Jason, you have to get a l'chaim.
I sent him a message.
Larry,
I got a glass.
you have a l'chaim, Larry.
Gonna get one.
And David, a l'chaim. And ladies, if you have some l'chaim also. Yeah.
Not on me.
Not on you. I didn't expect a bottle to be on you. I expect the bottle to be in the house, though.
Somewhere
Bottle
around.
on you would not be a good sign.
Smirnoff.
So, okay, pour some. And let's say l'chaim. We make a bracha together. I have a shahakol. If you have wine, then make on wine. And if you have, let's say, a shahakol together. And by the way, if you only have water, you can make l'chaim on water too. All right, ladies, you can make on l'chaim. Let's make it all together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah bibaro. L'chaim, everybody.
Chaim.
Oh,
Chaim l'vracha.
Chaim
L'chaim.
Chaim.
Go ahead, Reb Pesach.
that hit the chest.
I was just saying that in secular law, there's two kinds of ownership. There's the ownership of property that an individual could have, and there's the ownership also of a corporation. There's both kinds of ideas, and those are the two levels of ownership. So a corporation is like an individual in terms of ownership of property. That has a corporation has full property rights, just like a person does. That's why there's a value in secular law for a person who does business to have a corporation, because if the corporation goes bankrupt, the person who owns the corporation does not. The corporation has its own responsibilities and has its own rights and obligations, and just like an individual. So it's like an individual in terms of property.
Right.
Now, there's no other kind of idea. There's only the individual and the corporation. This posed the problem over here, where Berke, the one who took the books from the Rebbe's library, he claimed that the books belonged to the previous Rebbe. And as such, being that he was the heir of the previous Rebbe, he had every right then to abscond with the books, because factually, according to the case that he made, they belonged to him. This presented a problem in law, a definite problem in law, because if in fact it's owned by an individual, and the books were owned by an individual, the individual being the previous Rebbe, then it would be correct that the one who was his inheritor, the one who was his heir, his property would then automatically be inherited by his heir or his heirs. In his case, he was the only one of that generation, grandson of the previous Rebbe. So in order to resolve this situation, the court needed to understand an entire new category, a category that did not exist earlier, that there is an individual, and yet what he owns belongs to a community. So he's not a corporation because he's an individual. And didn't belong to a corporation, belonged to the individual. So this is the idea of the Rebbe, that's an idea that he's an Adam Klali. He's a general soul. And in him is contained and connected all of the souls of all of Israel, all the Jewish souls. And this was recognized in the court by Judge Sifton. And so actually established a precedent of a new category that says that there is a person that he himself belongs to the community, and therefore his possessions do not belong to his heirs, but belong to the community. This did not exist in secular law at all. And this was
because it can't, you know why it does? Because it can only exist by the Jewish people, the concept. And therefore it did not exist in secular law.
Because there's an idea in Adam Klali, right, that like the Rebbitzin, like the Rebbe's wife said that her father belonged to the community. The books belonged to the community because her father, the previous Rebbe, belongs to the community, and therefore his possessions belong to the community. And in secular law, there's no such distinction, because it's not a corporation. If it's an individual, then it belongs to the heirs of that individual. And the idea is, even though he's an individual, his property is not private, because he himself is not private. He himself is a soul that contains within him all of the souls of Israel, and his possessions then belong, like his Torah, belongs to all of the Jews. And so this was something very unique that came out of this case. And on this was the fulcrum on which the entire case was decided. And they recognized this idea that there's a person, being the previous Rebbe, who's an Adam Klali. He's a general soul. He's not just an individual soul, he's a general soul. And as such, even his possessions are owned in general, not in particular. It was a very, very interesting precedent.
Yeah, thank you. And that deserves a l'chaim.
L'chaim,
l'chaim v'racha. A good yontiv, everybody. So just in conclusion of our Farbregen learning, and now Farbregen is the way to celebrate this is, of course, by learning Torah, but also by buying Sfarim, buying holy books. So if you didn't get an opportunity, go online now to either kahot.org, KEHOT.org, or you can go to Chabad.org. Maybe there's you can get from them also holy books, and you can purchase at this hour. But it's a time to buy, to enlarge our Jewish library, and to increase in the learning of the things that we have in our library of Jewish content, of Torah content. So Chaim, a good yontiv to everybody. Thank you for all joining the class and the Farbregen. And we should go from this Farbregen to the ultimate Farbregen, that the Rebbe will lead us out of this exile, the Geula Shlema, of the ultimate redemption, and in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, because we spoke today about the Holy Temple, and we're waiting for the third and finally a Holy Temple, that finally the presence of God will be brought down into this world in such a clear way that all of the negativity and the evil of the world will be eradicated, and there will be only but good, and will be engaged all the time in the presence of God's goodness and holiness, and will be constantly growing and learning, and only light, and not have to deal with any more darkness. L'chaim. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A good Tanakh and a good yontiv. And a mazel tov to Jason again.
Yes, Mazel Tov.
Yes, Mazel Tov, Jason.
Mazel tov, Jason. Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Wonderful.
Mashiach now.
Amen.
Hey.
All the best.
Way to go,
Thank you,
Jason.
everyone. Thank you, everyone.